Right.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So, what our topic for tonight is we are looking at tactical combinations. So, quite an interesting topic. The first thing I think we need to determine is what is the difference between a tactic and a combination. A lot of people have their own definitions for this. The definition that I personally chose to present for this lesson is as follows. We have a combination, which is a sequence of forcing moves with a specific goal and is grounded in tactic. A sacrifice is likely to be present. That's from the Oxford Chess Companion. And then tactics are a mix of all the tactical motifs. These are the double attack, pin, skewer, x-ray, discovered attack, removing the guard, mate, and stalemate, plus calculations that allow you to know whether attacking an enemy unit is effective while also knowing whether all enemy attacks are to be taken seriously or laughed at. So those are quite long-winded definitions. Basically, if we have to sum it up, all combinations involve tactics to some degree, but not all tactics are combinations, right? If you play a one-move fork, that's not necessarily a combination, that'll just be a tactic. Whereas let's say you remove the guard and then you play a fork, then that would fall under as a combination. So we're also going to look at today, I wanted to look at something slightly different to how we'd usually present this. We are still going to look at some games where there's just very nice tactical combinations, but I also wanted us to look at tactical operations which involve no immediate threat to the opposing king. Such tactical motifs are often employed simply to secure some small positional advantage. So in a lot of these positions we're going to look at, there's not going to be, we're not just winning a queen, we're often just gaining a very small edge. And then, okay, one last thing before we get started. Tactics are the engine of the game of chess and often bring many a strategic plan to life. Tactics are always going to take precedence over strategy. We had the session, I think a month ago, that Dion did, where he talked about this a lot. You can have the greatest plan you want, but if it doesn't work tactically, it's garbage, which I think he said then that of Magnus Carlsen, he could be Magnus Carlsen, but if he blundered a tactic every game, he'd be like a 1500 rated player. So it's very important that we understand tactics very well. But okay, that's enough of me talking. Let's get into things. So we're going to look at some games today by someone I don't think any of you have heard of, Ratmir Kolov, or Kolmov. I'm not even sure how to pronounce the name. Don't think any of you have heard of it. If any of you have heard of him, you're welcome to say so and prove me wrong. But he is a player from a bit of the olden days. There's a game here against Robert Fischer that he won. So he's no slouch. Okay, so this game he's playing against Abram Kasim, another player we haven't heard of, but often analyzing these lesser known games can be very instructive. So this game begins with d4. I'm just going to go through the opening quite quickly. I like looking at the complete game, but there's not too much benefit in relation to our topic. Black plays knight f6. White continues with knight f3, g6, g3, bishop g7. Black is playing some King's Indian defense setup. And white is also fianchettoing. Castles, d6, b3. White goes for some double fianchetto type setup. Pawn to e5, d takes e5, d takes e5, bishop a3. We get a queen trade. The rook comes to e8 to prevent, obviously, the bishop capturing it. And knight c3 and bishop d7. And this is where I want us to pause up. Can anyone see the potential for some form of tactical combination? You don't need to calculate it properly as of yet. Can we just see the potential for it? It's white's move. You're welcome to just unmute yourself or type an answer in the chat. Let me just pull up.
Is there some form of like knight taking e5 and bishop taking g7, b7?
Yeah, no, that's completely correct. On Black's previous move, he played bishop to d7. So there's a great quote. I think Grandmaster Ben Feingold always says it. I'm sure it's not original, but he always says, when you move a piece, it's not where it was. And I remember when I first heard it, it's a really stupid quote. Obviously, the piece isn't where it was if you just moved it. But I think it's a really good habit to get into. When a piece moves, what it was previously protecting might not be protected anymore. And as Raun mentioned, the b7 pawn is now weak. So ideas like knight takes e5 come into play. So now this is where we need to calculate. There's kind of two parts of finding these combinations. There's the imagination, the creative part where you have to see the idea, and then you have to purely crunch the numbers to see if it actually works. So knight takes e5. Black probably has to respond if rook takes e5, and how does the variation go from there? If we can calculate it all the way through.
Yeah, it would be knight takes e5, rook takes e5, bishop takes b7, and then bishop c6.
Bishop c6.
And if you
Okay.
take the rook, it's 2 pieces for the rook, which
Yeah.
isn't quite as good.
Okay. No, fair enough. And this is probably the other thing I want us to focus on a lot tonight, is when you calculate a variation, we need an evaluation at the end. So, because otherwise what happens is you kind of lose track of who's ahead in material or whose pieces are more active. So every time you're calculating a variation, you need to decide, okay, is this equal? Is white better? Is black better? Is white winning or is black winning? And one of those evaluations have to be true. So in this situation, Rowan, what would you say is the evaluation after that position?
I'd say that I'd probably prefer black a little bit, purely because he's got 2 pieces for the rook.
Okay.
Oh wait, no, I lie. I'm not calculating the entire variation too. White wins after rook to d8 in that line because you pick up the knight.
Does he though?
Oh no, rook comes back. Oh my word, it's a long line.
Yeah, it's a long variation. That's part of the reason I chose it. We are going to have some examples later where I am going to want you guys to calculate more thoroughly, but this is just kind of the appetizer. So this is what was played in the game. Knight takes e5. Black obviously has to capture back, otherwise he's down a pawn. Bishop takes b7. Bishop comes to c6. Bishop takes a8. Bishop takes a8. And now we get rook d8 and rook e8 as discussed. So often what's very tricky in these positions is you kind of lose track of the board as a whole when you're trying to calculate long variations like this. Because if we look at this position, I would kind of evaluate it differently to how Rowan evaluated it from a distance. And okay, he is a very strong player, but if we count the pawns, white has 2 pawns. We have 2 pawns and a rook for 2 pieces, which I would deem almost as material equality. The 2 pieces are a lot stronger than the rook in most situations, but here we have 2 pawns, and I think white is significantly more active. If we look, the knight and bishop are very vulnerable on the back rank. His pieces are kind of uncoordinated, whereas all of white's pieces are going. And there's already the threat white has of playing rook takes e8 and then going rook to d8. So it is difficult for black to look to untangle his pieces. He chooses to just bring the knight out to c6, covering the d8 square. And after rook takes, knight takes, we get knight d5. So again, we do have our 2 pieces for the rook, but also the 2 pawns. And now there's also the pressure on the c7 pawn. So let's see how black continues this game. He plays bishop to f8, looking to trade pieces. We get bishop takes f8 and king takes f8. And now white solidifies his position of c4, just trying to secure the knight on d5, eliminating any tactical ideas. Now black goes knight a5. And now again, I want you people to think and see if we can come up with any potential tactics for white in this position. Are there any ideas? Again, there's not too many of us, so you are welcome to just unmute yourself. Or if you don't want to talk to me, you can always type something in the chat.
Is it some like knight takes c7, knight takes e7, rook to d7, and when the knight moves, you take on a7, forking the 2 pieces again?
Okay, that is definitely an idea we should look at. Whenever we're looking for these tactical ideas, there's always the basic thing we teach when you first learn chess. You look at your checks, then you look at your captures, and then you look at your threats. Those are your forcing moves. And all forcing moves fall under one of those 3 categories. We obviously look at checks first because it's easiest to calculate our opponent's responses. Then we look at captures because that's the second easiest thing, because usually he's going to want to capture back. And then we look at threats. So Yara capture knight takes c7, as Rowan's saying, and he's suggesting that after black plays knight takes c7, we will get rook d7, and then you were saying after the knight moves somewhere, let's just say e6, you were going to play rook takes a7 and win piece back that we had just given up.
Yeah, pretty much the idea.
And with 2 pawns interest, so that would be, we'd be up like 4 pawns in that position. So if that is true, and that would be very desirable. However, always with these tactics, again, we do need to calculate all the way through. What is some other option for black here where you could potentially try to save the piece? Unsuccessfully, but it's still another option that we should calculate. See, we do have some people just joining us now, so it's good to have everybody here. Our topic for tonight, tactical combinations. So it should be very exciting. So here, what I think might have been overlooked is knight a6. And after rook takes a7, we get bishop b7. And somehow everything holds together. However, we can immediately notice that the coordination of the black pieces is very dodgy. And even though everything is defended now, it can still be disturbed with b4. So I really like this game because there's 2 main points where combinations are played, and there are these very long combinations that kind of decide the game. Because now after knight takes b4, we get rook takes a5. And now the position has simplified. We discussed, I think 2 weeks back now, we had talked about the rook against 2 minor pieces. And we said the rook gets stronger as the game gets closer to the endgame. And okay, that is happening now. And we still have our 2, we have 3 pawns now, 2 of which are pass pawns. So this game did finish up quite quickly. I think they just played not too many more moves. White just threw his a pawn. It's very hard to stop. And once both the black pieces are passive, then white just switches his attack over to the king side. So a very nice game by Mr. Kolmov. I don't want to dwell on it too deeply. This is just kind of the appetizer. So let's move on to another one. We are going to spend just a little bit of time looking at games at the start, and then we are going to just get into some straight up tactical puzzles. Because with a topic like this, there's only so much theory that can help you. A lot of this is going to be what you need to work on. You need to spend hours, whether it's going through tactics trainers, whether it's going through tactics books. One of those. Calculation is not something you can just kind of get from listening to a lecture. You actually need to be applying yourself. Let's look at another game. This is Gregory Bashrikov. I'm not pronouncing that right, against our boy Mr. Kolmov. So he's playing black in this position, and white starts with c4. We get c5, symmetrical English, and after knight f3, knight c6, d4. Now the opening is transposing. You see a lot of top grandmasters these days play c4 because they can often try and trick their opponents into playing lines that maybe they're more comfortable with. It's very, very flexible. So after c takes d4, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, we get g6. And now we've kind of transposed into a Sicilian Maroczy bind. So very different type of position. Get bishop g7, bishop e3, castles, castles, bishop e2 first, and then e castles, and a6. Okay, so what is black's main plan in the Maroczy bind? Someone want to tell us? Has anyone here got a chess education?
I've played this position like once. I don't know the plans for either side of the
Okay,
board.
no, fair enough. Thanks for the answer. Anybody else want to say their opinions? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, so the main imbalance in this position, and I like looking at the imbalances, what's different, is that white has a lot more space. We look these pawns on e4 and c4, they clamp down. Black's never really going to get d5 in, and he's playing for space advantage. When we have a space advantage, we do not want to trade pieces. If you have more space than your opponent, you want to keep as many pieces on the board. because you have more pieces that can utilize more squares. Whereas black often feels like he has a piece too many. Like there's not really a good square for this bishop. So often one plan that black adopts is he trades this knight, then he puts the bishop on c6, then he goes knight d7 and tries to trade the dark square bishop as well, and hope for some ending where his light squared bishop is better than white's light squared bishop. The other plan that black has is he potentially wants to play b5 and try and break, which we might see a bit later. The plan for white is often just to play very slowly with the space advantage. Sometimes you see them get aggressive, some f4, f5 ideas, but often they can backfire. Okay, in this game though, white just plays h3, preventing any idea of the bishop ever coming to g4. We get bishop d7, queen comes to d2, knight d4, bishop d4. And now can we see a way for black to tactically play one of those strategic ideas I just mentioned? Well, I didn't mention many strategic ideas, so it shouldn't be too hard to come to. A way for black to break loose from the shackles. There's only the 2 pawn breaks in this position for black, right? He has d5, which, as we said, is often very hard to get into, and b5, which is what he chooses to play. Now, okay, it might look like this is defended, but because we look initially 1, 2, 3, 3 attackers, 1, 2 defenders. I learned in maths class that 3 is more than 2, but in this situation,
but as soon as the knight takes, you take on e4.
Yeah, this knight, he's overworked, like me. So he has to protect e4 and he's protecting b5 and he can't do both. So what happens is after exchanging, he chooses to take here, which effectively gives up his e-pawn. And this is a very bad decision because what white has done now is he's given up his grip on the center and black is a very, very comfortable game. Maybe a better idea for white would have been something like a3. Just to prevent any ideas of the pawn pushing to b4. I mean, okay, we can let's capture first on b5 and then go a3. And now we can maybe say that this pawn on b5 is going to be weak long term. Maybe there's the idea of us playing f3 and then looking to target it. But yeah, okay. In the game though, knight takes b5, knight takes e4. We get queen to e3, knight comes back to f6, knight comes back to c3. Both sides are just kind of regrouping all their pieces. Black now plays e5. White spawns out of the center, so black says, I will take the center. Bishop comes to b6, queen b8, and the pawn comes to f4. So now I want us to just take a minute. I want us to look for some tactical possibilities for black here. The position might look a bit dry, but there is some ideas. So I'm going to give you guys, let's say 2 minutes, and then I want some responses from you all. Okay. Does anyone have some ideas?
What if you play bishop h6?
Bishop h6. Someone had a lot of wheat bix for breakfast. Okay, your idea of bishop takes
h6.
bishop Okay, bishop h6. Wait a second. We're playing this bishop to h6. Okay. Bishop h6 yeah looks like a lot more of a restrained move. I actually like the idea of bishop h6 because we pin the f pawn. So it's not so obvious what white should be doing here. Don't really look at bishop h6. Let me see now. What are some options for white? If someone wants to help me out, they are welcome to.
I was also looking at bishop h6, by the way, as the tactic of pinning the pawn. I wasn't too sure what white plays here.
I remember analyzing this, and there's some reason it's wrong, but I can't seem to find it. Let's see. Because if we just make any passive queen move, we run into just losing our pawn. I don't think that's too desirable. There's no real way to defend it of one of our minor pieces. Playing something like g3 feels not so good. Yeah.
Isn't there something where you can just like move the queen, and when the bishop takes, you play something like g6 because the knight's looking a little bit bad there?
Yeah. No, I think that is definitely something like, let's say, queen f3. Okay, queen f. We probably want to still protect this bishop, which. So let's just say we go queen f2. Then bishop takes f4, and we play g3. And I think this is kind of working out for.
Yeah, like bishop g5, you play h5.
Yeah, and at the very least, black's pieces get very dislodged. You can in fact see some position after, let's say, bishop here, where we trade these pieces, and then the knight. Okay, that does come with check.
That's a check.
Not so.
It's not as easy. Never mind.
Yeah, let's see. Where's the tactical geniuses when I need them?
I have a question.
Yes, Matthew.
Can you go to like the beginning position?
I think
Yeah.
wait.
Okay. What if you take the pawn on f4?
Okay, I think the idea. Okay, your idea is if we play queen takes, we hang the bishop with check, right? So that's undesirable. Yes. And if we play rook takes, you're wanting to play some combination of bishop h6. I presume is your idea. This also looks quite strong. So let's see. If we take here, what other options do we have? Well, so many strong moves. I'm presuming something like queen d4 is very bad. But yeah, the bishop on b6 is just loose in so many positions. And we try rook takes, yeah. And then bishop, yeah. Do I have this in my lines? Bishop d4. Okay, this is nice. Yeah, this I did have in my notes, which the idea is now after you take my rook, that I simply just take back. And now I'm saying you might have won an exchange, but you've lost all your dark squares. So what do we play here? Like, I don't actually think there's a way.
Yeah, like if you move the knight, you just play queen h6 and it's almost game over.
Yeah, it gets very unpleasant. There's potential for the light squared bishop coming in if you ever have to play f6. So I don't think this quite works. I'm still wanting... Is there a similar idea in the original line with this bishop move? Not seeing it. How do we refute this one? If we play a4 and say something like takes.
And you play rook takes.
I don't know if rook takes is the right idea. My idea was just to play queen f2 and say I'm going to play h5, stabilize the position, and then look to play very slowly with g3. So I think this might be a nice way of doing it. Because the bishop is kind of awkward on f4. So it might be something we regret doing a bit later. But okay, I do like the idea. Is there any other ideas? Because in game, like solution that happened in the game is very elegant. Let me look properly with our best friend, Mr. Computer, against these ideas. So after bishop h6, it is just saying a4. It's saying this is still quite good for you, but once we secure the bishop, white should be fine. And the other idea of taking first, yeah, just rook takes f4, and we sack the exchange. Okay, that's Mr. Computer, the man of all the answers. Do we have something better then? Something more subtle. We can identify that the bishop on b6 is a massive target. Can we find some way to exploit that? So remember what our forcing moves are. Our forcing moves are checks, captures, and then threats. If we just really simplify it, okay? We have no way to check. We only really have the one capture that makes any sense on f4, which doesn't work. So we need to find a threat.
How about you try to play rook c8, because mostly it is the knight which is stopping like the breakthrough in our pieces, because we want our knight to come either to e4 or maybe to d5. Those would be some good places to place it. So how about rook c3 with the plan maybe to take away the knight and try to find a way to use this knight and this bishop on d7 to go for the king.
Okay, I like the idea. I am worried that our f pawn is weak, though. I'm not sure if that is going to be a problem. Just say I take on e5. What do you want to do? You want to take back, I presume, right? You don't want to take the knight yet. So maybe just say you capture back. And okay, your rook is quite active. I'll probably do something like, I just go rook d1, and I'm not entirely sure what your plan is. Because now I have ideas of chopping your knight on f6 and then taking the bishop.
How about like if I tried either to first move the bishop to c6 or to first eliminate the knight, then move the bishop to c6?
Okay, if you chop the knight, I'm not so convinced by this position. Like, you're getting the square potentially. I'm not even sure you are. Like, I might just go bishop c4, and I don't think I know what you're doing, because there's going to be a lot of pressure against f7. If you do it without chopping the knight, I think black is doing all right here, but I don't think he's doing fantastically. Maybe we just play something like, maybe just bishop c5. We secure the bishop, we get ideas of bringing the bishop into e7. And okay, I think white's doing quite solidly at the very least. Okay, let's look at maybe the idea it's played in the game. I think there were quite a few good suggestions that were mentioned. Thing is, with tactics, everything's always very concrete. So the move played in the game is bishop c6, which is kind of funny because I was just saying bishop c6 wasn't doing anything in the previous position. But now we need to work out why is bishop c6 played. This isn't a capture, this isn't a check, so it must be a threat. What is the threat? It's very subtle.
Is it to play knight d7 and attack the bishop?
Knight d7 and the bishop is trapped. Okay. So the solution, I think we all detected that the bishop on b6 was potentially a problem. This just was finding a way to attack it. So for white to get the bishop out, he effectively has to take on e5. And now, I think this is what happened in the game. We got knight d7, the bishop came to d4. Now after we took on e5, the bishop comes to c5, knight takes c5, queen takes c5, and queen takes b2. And black has now won a pawn by force. The idea, of course, being that if rook takes c6, we're playing rook ac8 and we're picking up the knight. So a very nice combination. As with all of these combinations, we have to calculate it all the way to the end. So rook b1 is played. Queen comes to a3. We get queen takes c6, rook c8, queen d5, and now queen takes c3. So black has now gained a pawn, and his position is maybe not winning, but very, very close to winning. White plays bishop f3 just to secure his pieces. I think one of the grandmasters always said that there can't be any tactics if there's not unprotected pieces. So it's always a good idea to look out for unprotected pieces. Black now goes rook c5, and white answers with rook b3. So what white is hoping for in this position is what we looked at last week. He's hoping for an opposite colored bishop ending. He thinks if the queens get exchanged, there's opposite colored bishops, and he has a good chance at drawing. We get rook takes d5, rook takes e3, and now e4. So the tactics just keep on coming. So it is a discovered attack on the rook. But what is happening here? So who can calculate this accurately for me? What is happening here, and what is the evaluation of the position at the end of the combination? Again, it's very important you get the evaluation. Giving the moves is just half the answer. So the most important thing for us to calculate is what's happening after bishop takes e4. And if we can answer that, then we see if there's any other options for white.
Is it bishop takes e4, bishop d5 check? When the king moves, you play rook to e5, and then both the rook and bishop are hanging.
Yeah, very good. Our natural reaction is just to say capture the rook, but this position is very bad for black. We've given up all our chances of winning, and there's pressure against IF pawn. If we just move the rook, okay, we've given up a pawn for nothing. So yeah, which is why we get this very nice idea with bishop d4, as Rowan said, and after king h1, rook e5, and two pieces are attacked. It's very hard to defend against double attacks. White still is kicking though. He goes rook c4, we get rook takes e4, and now rook d1. So now he's trying to say that the pin is inconvenient. Okay. Black has to go rook d8 to protect the bishop. And white just starts running this a pawn. So black has played a very nice game tactically now. Now he just needs to find a way to finish this. What is the easiest way for black to win this game? He's up a bishop. But he kind of can't move that bishop, because it's pinned effectively in two ways. How can we finish this game in the easiest way possible? A lot of people, they get winning positions and they kind of switch off, which is why you see, at least at the amateur level, so many people win or lose games when the true evaluation of the position is the opposite. Matthew, you got an idea?
Yeah, I have a suggestion.
Yeah, go for it.
What if black goes f5?
F5. So now we protect this rook. Okay, let's just say I keep going a5. Now your idea is to go bishop f6. Okay. Yeah, I think this does work as a way to untangle it. I think, yeah, it should work. There's a more exciting way, which is what was played in the game though. King g7. Your idea does work though. a5, and then he simply played bishop e5. Pins can be discovered attacks. So a very nice little way of finishing it. But okay, the game did end here and black was victorious. Okay, we're going to look at two more snippets and then we're going to get into some straight up exercises. So these positions are also from the games of Mr. Kolmov. So this position, is it black to play? I think it's black to play. Yeah, it's black to play. Let me flip the board for everyone. So the first thing we should do is count material, right? White is up a pawn, but the pawn on e5 is hanging or very weak. So how should black continue this game? And what are both sides trying to do? I'm going to give you people a couple minutes to have a thought about it, and then I want some analysis. And again, these positions, we're not just winning queens with forks, right? We're often looking for subtle advantages. Maybe I should hide the moves, but you people are good people. You would never cheat, I'm sure. I think this is one of the few positions we're going to look at tonight where there is multiple ways that black can proceed.
How about queen to c5?
Queen c5. Okay, so your idea is you're pressuring me along this diagonal and you're hitting the c pawn. I'm concerned that do you not lose to knight e3? Do you have a refutation to this, or was it just overlooked?
It was overlooked.
Okay, no, fair enough. Rather make all your mistakes now than when it's in a game and costs you. Anyone else have some ideas how you would want to continue this position?
I was trying to see if I can make like rook takes f2 work, but it doesn't quite work.
Yeah, okay. No, that is
And
definitely
then I started looking at something like rook f5.
Rook f5. Okay, what's your idea of rook f5? How do you think play is going to continue?
My immediate threat is just to take the knight, right? Rook takes, bishop takes, queen takes. So the line I was calculating was knight f6, then rook a to f8. I wasn't sure what white was playing after that.
So you were saying after rook f5 that white's going to play knight f3. Is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think in this position, can we not just take this knight? Surely this is good.
I thought of taking, then pawn taking, then playing rook f, but then you just. Oh, you want to move the queen?
I was thinking more queen h4 was my initial reaction, but maybe that's. I think queen h4 works, right? Isn't this strong? Yeah, because now you can't go king h2 because you're in trouble. So maybe king g2, and at the very least, I think black has initiative here. I don't think he should be too upset about the extra pawn.
Because I was going to play rook a to f8 first.
Yeah, and maybe that's possible. Because rook a to f8, he probably has to play f4, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. He plays f4 then.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if this is an improvement or not. I think there's potential for us to maybe be a bit more flexible. But I think this is quite strong. And okay, rook f5 is what I was playing the game. It's a very simple move, and I like this problem because a lot of people, they instinctively look for those sacrifice on f2. The coordination of pieces is kind of eye-catching. Whereas the simple move rook f5 or even just queen takes e5 are the good
Yeah, I'm
moves.
not most people.
Oh, you're special. Yeah. Okay. But the main line is knight takes e4, and this is what happens in the game. Now, if we simply capture with our pawn structure is ruined, and the position isn't so great. So what black's idea is now to play rook takes e5. Okay, and you could also play this idea just by playing queen takes first. Then we get something like knight takes e4, and then you go rook d8, which, okay, this is kind of just a different way of doing it. The main idea is we want to save our pawn structure and not overcomplicate things. But this is how the game continued. Sorry, was someone saying something?
This may go back a few moves.
Okay, here's our starting position.
Because when the rook is played to f5, then you said if the knight plays to f3, if the knight is played to f3, now will it be okay to play the queen to c5?
Okay, now you're wanting the idea of pressuring the c pawn. This also maybe looks quite nice. Because, okay, the knight can't move, right? Yeah, I quite like this idea. Like, this does feel quite strong. I think generally, I don't think knight f3 is a very good option. I think knight takes e4 is forced. But this queen c5 idea is relevant, yeah. So that is a good spot. But in the game, knight takes e4 was played. So we get a position. The queen chooses to come to a6, which okay, I think is a very bad move. The queen is a bit out of play here. We get rook takes e4 and now bishop e3. So white is playing bishop e3 just to prevent the rook coming into e2. He does not want the rook infiltrating the second rank, right? One of the first things we learn in chess is that rooks really want to get to the second rank, and they turn into pigs on the 7th. It's always how I was taught it, eating up all the pawns. However, it does appear that we have a few more attackers here. So if we just play bishop takes, the problem is I think our c6 pawn is going to drop in some variations, and that white has potential to pick up some extra pawns. So what black does, he continues with rook to e8. He now feels forced to capture on b6, and suddenly from the starting position, black has regained his pawn, black has fixed his pawn structure, and black has complete domination of the e file. Just through that small little combination of pinning the knight. White continues with queen d3. We get queen to f6, now threatening the b2 pawn. b3, get pawn to h5, rook a d1. The rook comes to e5, getting even more active. Queen c3, c5. Black just keeps expanding. He's taking over the center. He has more central pawns than his opponent. White has no central pawns, whereas black has the d pawn. We get rook f to e1. So rook e1 is a tactical blunder. Who can tell me why rook e1 is a blunder? So the thing with tactics is you need to get so good at them that you can see them when you're not looking for them. And if you're solving tactics in a book or on a website, you know there's a tactic and you're specifically looking for it. Whereas if you're in a game, no one's tapping you on your shoulder and telling you there's a winning tactic. How can black win the game?
How about if you play, for example, to rook to e2, then if he takes the white rook, you take with your white rook. You take with your white rook. Then if he takes your queen, you take back, you lose. Then if he takes your pawn, you take his pawn.
Yeah. And what is your evaluation of this position? Are you winning? Is it equal? Is white winning? Is black winning? What's happening?
Yeah, we've given white control over the files.
Yeah, white is control of the file. I would say there should be a draw because like our rook is active, which is one of the most important things in rook endings. I'd presume something like a5, rook b2, rook d3 might even happen, and white might go quite passive, but it should be a draw of correct play. So yeah, we are looking for something a little bit better than this. But nice idea. Because we always should consider simplifying to the end game. Like if you have a one position, the easiest way to win it is to take it to the end game.
Yes.
What if you move d4?
b4. You suggesting rook b4 or pawn b5?
d4.
Oh, d4. Sorry, I'm mishearing you. Pawn to d4. Okay. So your idea now is you're threatening my queen, and I'm not entirely sure what else you're doing. So okay, let's just say I go queen d2, which is probably the most natural response. What is your plan now? I think we always need a plan. Just one move isn't going to get us anywhere.
You could probably try to exchange queens so that you like remain with only two rooks, and since you
I mean, we get the same endgame though, don't we? Like an extra rook doesn't change the valuation of that endgame. Like, let's just say we go queen f5. Let's say we magically get a position like this. Like, again, this isn't how it would happen, but there should still be a draw, even though black might have more space and a slightly favorable pawn structure. It's still going to be equal.
Move backwards.
Hmm.
There.
Yeah.
When the rook takes the white queen.
Yeah, I get that there's a piece hanging, right? That this rook is hanging at the end, but
Why doesn't the white?
yeah, I'm just wanted to show that as an example. If we get to trade the queens, the position still isn't good for us, right? So that was what I was going for. Like maybe you can do it like this is the better way of doing it. But okay, if anything, now white is better in this position if he's more active rook. Okay. Do we have any other ideas of the rook to e1? We want something more clean. We want a knockout blow. I think this game ended in 2 moves. 2 moves. I'll give you guys 1 more minute and then we'll look at the solution if no one's had a spark of brilliance.
how about rook to f5?
What's your idea of rook to f5?
Maybe that if he tries to take the queen, you can take the rook and remain with one rook, or maybe you can try to create a battery to attack f2.
Yeah, the problem is it again gets too simplified, and I don't think this is ever good for you, right? Too many pieces get traded, and all the endgames with one rook and the same amount of pawns will be drawn, or at the maybe one side will be slightly better. If anyone is, I think it would be white, sure.
Or rook to f4.
Rook f4 hangs a rook. You hang the rook on e5. Okay, doesn't seem like anyone's coming to the correct idea. So the right idea is just rook takes e1. And after rook takes e1, it's very, very nice move, rook e2. Move of class. We hit the queen, and the queen can't move anywhere where it still protects the rook. Very nice. Tactical blow by black. And the game just ended, yeah, straight up. There's no way white can avoid losing material. So it's very important that you master tactics, because you can spend years studying strategic chess. You can become the greatest masterful planner of all time. But if you blunder a tactic, the game just ends on the spot. So tactics kind of allow us to achieve our strategic goals. Okay, let's move along. Got one more snippet from a game, and then we're going to have a look at some exercises. So I want you to take some time thinking here. It is black to play now. Okay, black is in check. I will be very nice and tell you all the available moves, which, okay, there's only 5, so it's not that useful. You need to tell me which one is the best, and you need to have considered what white is going to do against each of those plans. And then you need to give me an evaluation of the position. I think I'm going to put a timer on for 2 minutes, and after those 2 minutes, then we'll see if people have something to say.
Coach Michael, who's turn to play?
Well, black is in check, so black needs to get out of check. Two minutes have surpassed, though. Does anyone want to explain their thought process to me?
King h7.
King h7. Why do you want to play king h7? Like,
To probably put the king in like a safe place.
okay, you're playing king h7 because you feel like it's safer. Okay, that makes some sense. We can. Yeah, Rowan, were you gonna comment on this?
No, continue this line first. Finish this
Okay,
line first.
and then we'll come back to you. King h7, I think you might not be doing so great. Let me try and work out why. Okay, let's just play a move. Can I play a4? Takes, maybe not.
Can't you
Maybe
just
that's
double up
crazy.
on the G file? So like say
Yeah.
rook G3.
I mean, if we play something like rook G3, I think rook G8 comes automatically. And I wasn't so sure that this was great for white. I mean, I could still be wrong, but I'm worried that the a pawn's weak in the long run. So, Okay, maybe we just play something simple. Let's play king e4. Now, what are you doing? Because it's not obvious to me what black's plan should be. And I mean, our only thing going for us is black is our active rook on d3, which maybe white will look to trade off at a point. But I'm not too convinced by king h7, unless you have some other plan alongside with it. What was your idea going to be, Rowan?
I haven't calculated it fully, but it's the one that jumped out to me immediately is bishop G5.
Bishop g5.
Because the F pawn is pinned using the rook. And I thought if you just tried something simple like H4 to attack the bishop, you play rook takes F4, right? So
That's a pin. Yeah.
But now the problem comes when he plays either king E2 or king E4 and pinning.
Yeah. Well, king e2, I think we can. I'm not sure if we can get away with taking the. I think we can just take
You can't
the pawn.
take it, it's pinned.
Okay, yeah, sorry. No, I'm being dumb. Yeah. So I was wanting to go king e4. I was trying to find a reason that king e4 is better than king e2, but I presume it's just as good. I prefer centralizing the king, but yeah, now we are just losing the bishop, right?
Well, no, I was thinking something more like rook takes E3, king E3, and rook F4 with potential discoveries, but I don't think it's quite working.
Yeah, I think maybe just. I mean, there is still some merit to it. I think the problem is there's not really any good discoveries. Like, even if he maybe he can just laugh at us even and just activate his rook. Might be a nice kind of way of dealing with it. But yeah, I think this does deserve calculation, but maybe it's not the best way of doing things.
Yeah, like, it was king E4, like, I'm not sure what to play after that move.
Yeah. It kind of feels like the king gets very active and maybe we regret.
And the bishop's now hanging.
Yeah, putting our bishop in the pin. I think we have to go for that exchange sacrifice, but it's not the most convincing. What is our thoughts on king f5? Stepping into the lion's den. Did anyone consider this move?
Problem is, I'm not too sure what black's plan is with stepping forward like this.
I mean, okay, fair enough.
I like rook g7.
Rook g7. Yeah, rook g7 this is how the game continued. And I think we'll see what the plan is with king f5.
I've
and
seen this game by Kolfer and Fischer before. Very nice one.
Yeah, no, it is a very nice game. Not every day Fischer gets outplayed like he does in this game. So yeah, but rook g7 activates. And the difference, I think, between putting the king on f5 is shown after black's next move, which is bishop d8 with the idea of coming bishop e6. And let's say we do the same idea. Let's just say king h7. We'll get something like rook g2, and then we do this idea. It doesn't quite have the same venom because now the king will just come to e4. So the king on f5 is a lot more active. Okay, but the drawbacks to having the king on f5 is that we're kind of getting mated. Let's just say we do nothing as black. Let's just go something terrible, rook e8. Then he goes rook g1, and we get ourselves into a lot of trouble on g5 potentially. Right now, the bishop and pawn are covering it, but it might not be like
isn't there a mate?
Isn't it rook f7
already?
mate?
Oh, no, it's not.
I mean,
Never mind.
Yeah, rook
No,
f7
yeah,
mate
rook
is
g1.
threatened. Yeah, and this can't be
I
defended.
thought it was mate immediately, but he's actually got king g6 before
Yeah,
you play rook g1.
we do want to trap the king first, but yeah, rook f7 mate is more the threat. And I don't think we can defend that, right? There's no way the king's in a mating net. So that is the threat. which is why king f5 is very difficult to play and why I started with this position. Because king f5, you have to consider all of these options. You have to see that rook g7, it's very scary. You have to see that after bishop d8, we have this bishop b6 idea. As the game continued, rook b7 was played to stop it. If we get rook a to g1, what does black play? How does he avoid getting himself in trouble here? Because if we play bishop b6 now, it's mate. Now my idea works. This is gonna be a very nasty memory. So how can we prevent checkmate as black?
Rook takes e3.
Rook takes e3. Yeah, very nice. And after king takes e3, we get our bishop b6, and
Skewered.
we trade pieces. Our king is more active, and black should win. We'll pick up the f pawn, and it's a very nice game for black. In the game, though, okay, these are top grandmasters. They're not going to play for cheap tricks. They play rook b7 just to stop bishop b6. Okay, now the rook is slightly passive. Black continues with rook to g8. He's looking to activate on the open file. White plays rook b8, putting pressure on the bishop. We get rook to g7. I'm not entirely sure what the reasoning for playing rook g7 is. I think he's wanting to swing over to the d file. Because with the b file, the g file, there's not too many squares we can look to enter on, right? The whole value of controlling an open file is that you can access one of your opponent's ranks, but here the white king restricts that. We get a4. White looks to activate his rook on a1. Black plays h5. We get a takes b5, a takes b5, and now rook takes b5, which, okay, we see as annotated as a mistake. There is a variation that's given of rook a to a8, which is deemed more active. I don't think we're going to explore it. I want to still get to some other stuff tonight. So just know that that is a better try. It is still losing, though. Rook takes b5 is played, though. We get bishop to h4, preparing to bring the rook into g3. White tries to run with king e2, rook g2 check, king f1, rook h2. And the game very quickly finishes up as the white king is just too weak. He's kind of in a mating net. Black's king looks very active on f5 now. It doesn't feel in any danger. King f1, rook h2, and okay, this is where Fischer resigned, because okay, if he plays king g1, we'll just get bishop g3, and then black will go c2 and mate him on the back rank. So this is a very nice game from Kolmov. You don't see too many games from him. You always hear how brilliant Fischer is, but this is just a very...
You wanted us to
rare
calculate
game.
all of this in 2 minutes.
I mean, I wanted you to calculate if king f5 was an option. I don't know. All I needed to was king f5 and the bishop b6. I've seen some of the calculations done in this class. Not much expectations. But yeah, no, it's an interesting idea because no, king h7 I think was the idea suggested by Haggai and them, which I think it's, if I'm playing a game, if I see king f5, rook g7, I'm very, very scared, right? This needs to be considered. So often what will happen is you'll stop looking. You'll just, whereas if you look a little bit further and you see the idea of bishop d8, bishop b6, then it makes a lot of sense, right? Something like king f7 I think is playable, but then suddenly white starts pressing with king e4. So I think it's a nice example. But okay, we do have about half an hour left, so I do want to do some puzzles, and then maybe we'll get to a few more examples later on. So this first position we're going to look at, this is black to play. A lot of these are a bit more straightforward, I would say, than some of the stuff we've been looking at. I did try to find some abstract positions. I think how we're going to do these, I'm going to give, how much time do people need? How smart are you people? Let's say 2 minutes per problem. I don't want people to answer before 2 minutes, and then after those 2 minutes, we'll discuss the solutions together. So this position is black to play and find the best move. As always, if you think you see it very quickly, try to calculate a bit further, because often there may be tricks in the position that you might not have accounted for. So it's black to play.
Whenever you see a good move, don't play it immediately. Always look for a better move. Am I right, Michael?
Very good advice, Mr. David. You don't get your game in some great games list if you just play the first good move you see. I think a lot of people, they lose positions because they get complacent. They find one move that they think is, oh, it's good enough. And then the position slides away from them. Always got to play the best move. Okay, 2 minutes have surpassed. Does someone have some variations they'd like us to look at? Again, I do understand we aren't spending too long looking at it, so I don't expect perfect calculation, but I think if you do have something, it might benefit everyone if we can look at it together.
First move I looked immediately at was knight takes c3, and then queen takes, and then c5 comes.
C5
Good.
comes, but yeah.
I'm worried about rook
so-
c4.
I also looked at this line and yeah, like at worst, white plays rook c4, but many other lines he just wins a pawn. I'm like, you can just take, and queen takes, and he's up a pawn.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think that is definitely something that does need to be looked
I
at.
also looked at knight takes c3 and then followed by rook to d8, but then you just take the rook with check.
Yeah, that's over.
Yeah, no,
Taking the rook is wrong. That
would be.
move, that's not definitely not working.
I
Yeah.
also tried to look at like rook to rook a3 and I wasn't sure about that.
But then isn't it just rook takes knight?
Mm,
No, afterwards, knight takes c3.
Oh,
rook
afterwards.
a3.
Oh, you mean there after rook
Yeah.
a3 here? No, yeah.
I think that's the working line.
Okay.
I wasn't sure, like if he just moves like queen to b2 or something like that. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, and we need to work out what is the difference between throwing in rook a3 and queen b2 as opposed to just any other position, right? Without rook a3. So, because okay, if he takes queen a3, the tactic, we get our fork in the anger, and obviously we're winning a rook. So that's going to be very strong for us. But presumably white is not interested in that. If white just plays queen b2, what is happening?
Because now, like, let's say you play c5 and then pawn takes, and then white could actually just no, he can't.
We can't move, right? We're still pinned, whether it be to the queen. And this is the idea that was played in the game.
No,
But-
I wasn't saying move the rook. I was thinking of an idea like where you take with the pawn, and then after you've taken with the pawn, queen takes a3 because you don't get the check with the queen. But he's going to take with the queen regardless of what you do.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'm
it actually
actually
does work.
curious now. What happens if we play knight f3? Does this work? We might have. Am I being stupid? I think this might hold to some degree. Probably doesn't, because now we just play a quiet move. We just move the rook back.
What about rook instead to a4?
Yeah, I mean, you can play rook a4. I mean, anywhere along the file. Rook a4, I get drawn into play because you put more pressure on the pawn. That's probably the best way of doing it.
Because I like it because rook takes, if knight takes, and then queen takes check for fork if the queen goes away from the dark squares.
Yeah.
So the only move left is queen c3.
Okay, and after queen c3, at the very least, we cash out. So, yeah. Okay. No, and I do like how David was immediately drawn. David and Ron were both immediately drawn to knight takes c3, which kind of ties into what I was talking about earlier. How half the problem is coming up with the idea, and the other half is calculating the idea accurately. So
Yeah,
just
like
Hmm?
I thought it wasn't quite working, and I did see rook a3, but I still like I saw queen b2, and I'm like, I don't know if this is working anymore
Yeah.
because it's still hard to see.
I would just need a little more time than the amount I'm thinking of now
Yeah,
to
yeah,
figure
that
it
would have
out.
been like a half an hour sit
Yeah.
at the board.
Now
calculating
that's
whether
not
this
good. You
works.
cannot think for half an hour. If a Michael, can I just give something quickly?
Okay.
If you
go
ever
for it.
think if a person thinks longer than 20 minutes on a move, then there is something wrong. And there's something wrong with your thought or thinking process.
I mean, it also depends how long your game is, right? If you
I was being ridiculous. I
Yeah.
obviously don't spend 30 moves on it, but like 2 minutes is not. Like
Yeah.
I'd be taking a while to evaluate that over the board, you know.
Yeah. No, well, that's why we're wanting to mainly focus on spotting the right ideas, which we did do, yeah. With rook a3, and then we got queen b2, and then we got c5. And okay, the pin is just deadly on the queen on b2, and after a few more moves, white did gain some tempo on the rook, and okay, he managed to play this idea for rook b4, but he's just losing in the final position. He's down in exchange, Black's pawn structure might be ruined, but ultimately a rook is better than a knight. So, okay, very well done. Let's move along to the next one. This one, this one's also interesting to evaluate. I'll give you guys, let's say, 3 minutes for this problem. It is still tricky to do it, but such as the constraints of time. Can't buy any more time. So it is black to play. Find the best idea. Okay, time is up. Does anybody have some ideas they'd like to share?
I have an idea.
Yes, Matthew, what's your idea?
I was thinking Rook B2.
Rook B2. Okay, now we pin the bishop on C2. Did we consider White's idea of playing pawn to F5? Because it appears our bishop is trapped, and unless we have some active move that I'm overlooking, we might be in trouble, yeah?
I like the move to play instead of rook b2, bishop takes e4.
Bishop takes e4. Okay, bishop takes e4 definitely deserves some calculation. Again, it initially appears that two pieces are protecting it. What is your variation that you calculated, David, of the bishop takes e4?
At first, I actually took a look at possibly if f5 was, but unfortunately, bishop d5 check comes, so that ruins it. So it would have to be d5. I would have to play, would be given no choice. And now you're going to lose that piece.
Yeah. It is still
and
quite...
then it's a lot of activity for me, and plus I've got a pass pawn.
Yeah, no, the two pass pawns. Because, again...
It should help win.
Yeah, not everyone
Plus
is
the king, I don't like how it is. And you've got rook b2 coming up next.
Yeah, no, that is very good. At the start of the lesson, let me just review what we are talking about, because we are talking about minor tactics. So a lot of these tactical positions, we're not straight up winning a queen, we're often gaining a positional advantage, right? Which is what happens here and is what David is doing. So, okay, I don't know if we considered bishop takes h7 in this position, which allows white to not lose a pawn at the lead. And after king takes h7, he can move the queen with check. And okay, we get a position like this. Yeah,
I calculated something a little bit different.
Okay, what did
still
you
bishop
calculate?
takes e4. It was a combination of both ideas that were taken. So, and I played rook to b2. No, not c. Rook b2 first. And my first thought was, oh, but white plays rook to a8, but you can actually just take the rook on a8. But then I was like, okay, so then
Queen
to
c4
d1.
is a problem.
Queen c4.
Queen c4. Can't I play queen f3 as well?
Queen c4 threatens mate. Oh, no,
Yeah.
it's not mate. No, I thought it was mate. Sorry, you got the rook there.
Yeah, can't we just play queen f3 though?
Yeah, queen a3 seems fine.
Yeah, and then we...
Yeah, I calculated queen d1.
Yeah, queen d1, and
then I followed it by like...
we want to take the bishop, I presume?
Queen e1. Sorry, I thought we were on the other file.
Okay,
My bad.
queen e1.
Yeah.
Okay, and then now d5, and we're trying to say it's a small improvement, having the rook on b2. Yeah, okay. That is also something I need to look at. These small subtleties, the Zwischenzug, as we say in German. The in-between.
Calculate queen f3.
Yeah, you always have to calculate very carefully when you're playing these ideas. But I like the small attempt at an improvement. In the game, though, we did get this line of d5 and bishop takes h7. And now we get a position where we have to kind of evaluate what David was saying earlier. Black is up a pawn. Black has the two pass pawns. And potentially the white king is weak. And those are the prevalent factors in this position. Like, we haven't won any material from this exchange, but we've definitely improved our position. I think the game did go on a few more moves. We got queen to f5, rook e7. We traded the rooks. White did end up winning the d5 pawn, but then black's pieces got active. He was willing to give up the pawn for activity. And in the long run, the white king ends up being very weak, and I think he gets mated with some nice combinations here. The knight is given up. We get bishop f2 check. The king is chased all the way up the board, and then eventually he gets mated. So, very nice analysis. I think we definitely saw everything that we needed to there. I think let's do one more of these problems, and then, or maybe we're running out of time. Time goes by too quickly. Let's go on to another position if there's no other questions. So this position is black to play. I'm again going to give you guys 3 minutes to come up with some ideas, and then we'll go from there. Okay, our time is once again up. Does anyone have some thoughts on the position? Again, if you don't want to unmute yourself, you're welcome to type something in chat.
H4, H3 looks like an idea, but not enough into it.
Yeah, I think the idea of throwing, I mean, okay, the pawn's already on H5, right? So definitely that
Yeah,
idea must be in the
That's one idea to look at, not enough. Would
Yeah.
I know you could play eventually G3. It's just to weaken the kingside pawns a bit more. That's the main idea behind it.
Let me get a position like this, which I get potentially in an endgame if we infiltrate the second
Potentially it can
rank.
be good, but
Yeah.
not yet enough.
Yeah, and okay, white is
Yeah,
going to be making improving moves as well. Yes, Rowan?
I was looking at something like bishop to to h3, because now the rook is attacking on f3, right?
Yeah, and we're trying to abuse
And I
this
thought
pattern.
if they try and block with the bishop to bishop to g3, then you play h5. But there's actually, he can defend it by either just moving his king or playing rook to f2 if he really wants to go passive.
Yeah, I think probably king h1 is the easiest way, right?
Yeah, it just gets you out of it.
And we gain
And
a
then
tempo on the bishop.
Then I was starting to calculate in the starting position again, back to the starting position, knight to g5, trying to like it hits. I'm hitting f3 firstly with the fork, and then now the h3 seems a bit more scary again. Bishop h3 or knight h3 is now a possibility.
Okay, no, fair enough. I think that king h1 again
Then
stops all
still king
these
H1,
ideas.
yeah.
No, kind of ruins the party, so to say. Okay, I do like the idea of potentially trying to beat up the king, but it doesn't quite seem to be working, yo. Any of the people we haven't heard from, Matthew or Haggai, Anna, Reynard, you guys got any ideas? Yeah, doesn't seem like it. It's an interesting position because I think we're naturally drawn to the kingside attack, as is suggested by the move h5. Our knight can jump in, as Rowan was saying. And David was mentioning the idea of us throwing the h-pawn. The correct idea is, again, a bit more subtle. And it's just d4, which is what was played in the game. Okay. For one,
That's one of the moves I thought of, but it didn't make enough sense. You don't need to take or anything. You just play knight a4.
Knight a4 makes complete sense. But then after rook d8, what do you play? It's kind of weird because I play a move that doesn't appear to do too much, and it gets difficult to find a move for white. Because I do have a tactical threat. Let's just say you play rook e1, and I think I can play bishop takes c2. Or maybe not in this position. Because then right after queen c2, d3, you can play queen b1 potentially. Might escape. But yeah, it's difficult for you to defend the c pawn. And if you ever want to play something like c3, then there's a potential for me to create a pass pawn. There's a potential for me to play c5. And it's not so straightforward. I do think knight f4 is probably white's best response. I think there was some notation that was considering knight b1. Knight e4 is what was played in the game, which I think is not a very good move, but it nicely illustrates some ideas.
No.
So after bishop takes, if we take off the rook, can we see how black should continue here? An idea that was already mentioned
Rook
earlier.
takes f3.
We can play rook takes f3. I think we might even be able to play knight g5.
Knight g5, yeah, works very well.
Knight g5 is...
Yeah, and it's completely crushing.
Knight g5 is much stronger, you're right.
Yeah, and okay, so he's forced to take with the pawn, which is what happens in the game, and now we've kind of created a long-term weakness. The e-pawn is weak. We still have all our attacking ideas. And after c5, there's also potential that this bishop is kind of overextended. So it's an interesting position. There is still definitely a game of chess to be played, but it's potentially a small edge for black. These ideas with knight g5 are also starting to loom again, where they're hitting the e-pawn as well. White plays queen d3, defending the e-pawn against those knight g5 ideas. Black just continues. He brings his rook into the game. White offers the queen trade. Black chooses not to exchange. He's the side attacking. He does not want to exchange pieces. White plays pawn to h4. We trade off the knight for the bishop. And in the final position, black is a lot more active. I think that white did resign here, which is very early to resign. Okay, you should never resign here with white. But I think he just felt he had lost all counterplay. And okay, there's moves like queen f6 coming and just picking up the h-pawn. It's a very passive position.
I can understand why he'd want to resign. Yeah, I can understand.
Yeah, you can understand the mindset,
Right.
but it still shouldn't happen, right?
I might probably myself have very close to this, maybe a move or two. If someone plays a good one, I would resign myself.
Yeah, no, I can definitely get it. It also depends what level of opposition you're playing. But I think it's like a general principle. You want to at least have that fighting spirit a little bit longer. But it is a position where you very much lack counterplay, and black is just kind of running all over white. So, and this all stemmed from a move that looked not that harmful at first, right? Okay, as we were discussing, knight a4 might be a better option. But then after rook d8, there's ideas of rook d5, and suddenly black is more active again. So I quite like that position. We do have a couple more minutes left. What did I want to talk about? I wanted to talk a little bit about ways we can improve our tactics, because I think regular training for tactics is one of the most important things you can do. Like, there's always these sayings how chess is 99% tactics. I don't know if it's true. You can debate it yourselves, but I don't think anyone's going to deny that tactics are a massive part in the game. So I'd very much recommend, if you ideally probably get some tactics books. If you don't have ideas of which ones are good, you're welcome to send me a message and I can suggest some. Otherwise, just the tactics trainers on stuff like Lichess. Like, even if we just go to the puzzles dashboard here, Lichess recently updated all of these stuff. But the nice thing about these is you can choose the theme. So yeah, you can choose whether you're doing opening puzzles, endgame puzzles, pawn puzzles, double checks, forks, pins. And I think when you're first starting to get good at tactics, you want to try to do them specifically by theme, so you can identify the pattern. Okay, and then after you've done them a bit more, then you start trying to learn to identify them out of a position where you don't know what you're looking for, right? So you first need to get to the point where you can see them when you're looking for them. Then you get to the point where you can see them when you're not looking for them, which is like in a game situation. There is also, I think, one book I specifically use with quite a lot of my students, and that is the Woodpecker Method. I think if you haven't heard of it, you should definitely.
Very good book.
Yeah.
I
No.
bought the book myself and I've read it.
Yeah.
Except the third and final part of it is very difficult.
Yeah, you just can't solve those problems, but in like under those are like half an hour problems. If you want to actually set time there, which will.
That's just for one of them, and there's
Yeah.
a lot of it to figure
No,
out.
there's like 300 there, but yeah, those are more for your calculation. Because I think you should consider calculation and tactics almost as two different things, right? So the calculation is, that's your tactics. I mean, that's your puzzle rush. Those are what you're seeing instantly, the ideas in that. And then calculation, I would very much recommend more of your stuff like endgame studies or the more difficult problems, which will take more time, where you have to consider all the options, you have to calculate them deeply. And it kind of gets your brain working a lot in those ways.
A good book for that would be Dvoretsky's Endgame Manual.
Yeah, if you read Dvoretsky's Endgame Manual like fully and work through everything, I think you'll be an incredibly strong player. If you,
I've bought and read the book myself. Fantastic.
No, that's great. I'm one of the people who got the book. I started reading. I think I got through like the pawn endings, and it benefited me so much, but I just couldn't make the effort to go through the other endings. But you will
They're very difficult.
Yeah, no, it's an extremely challenging book. If you were looking
That's
for,
why only 1800 plus should read the edition Endgame.
yeah, no, I'd recommend if you're looking for an easier book, there's, I think, Delaville's 100 Endgames You Must Know might be more applicable for, or Silman's Endgame course are probably the two good ones.
Silman's Endgame you should read. Silman's Endgame is a better one rather than Jesus de la Villa's games. Yeah, his 100 Endgames are good, but I would rather look at Silman's Endgame.
Yeah, it is a bit more complete. But okay, I don't know if anyone
That's
has.
a good one. Is John Nunn's and Chess Endgame
Yeah,
book.
John Nutton. There is also, all his stuff is good, but yeah, there's a million
Yeah.
books you could read. I think most of the material out there is going to benefit you. Don't know if anyone has any questions related to what we covered tonight, or we can just call it an evening there. No questions? I'll take that as everyone
Yep,
agreeing with
cool.
me. I did see I missed a message in the chat, which I do apologize for that. I need to get better at observing everything. But okay, doesn't seem like there's anything else. Thank you all for coming. I hope to see you all again
Thanks, Michael.
next week. I think Mr. David's giving us a lecture, so I think it'll be really good if everyone can come to that.